Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'm here with a good friend, Brian Niemeier, author and editor and Mecha fan extraordinaire. I went ahead and linked his book. He has just come out with this new book. We talked a little bit about it when he was crowdfunding it, including selling packages where you could be killed in the book, which to me was just a very, very fun idea. It's Combat Freight Exceed S. And so you could pick that up. I think it's a good buy. I love the cover. I haven't read it yet. So I'm going to read it and continue on with his series, hopefully here in a little bit. So you guys can check it out, and hopefully it will meet some of your entertainment needs. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing phenomenal. How are you?
Doing good. I think, I go into this because of what's going on this week. Most people are going to expect us to talk a little bit about the election, but I think it's more fun to talk a little bit about entertainment first. And really, I think it's impossible to talk about one without the other because of what I want to say here. But I had someone ask a question a while back, like, should my fiction that I'm writing have some sort of political motive, or should it have some sort of message in it? And I said, should it be important? I'm like, there's nothing wrong with writing fiction that's meant to be just a good story or an escape. There's places in life for those things too. There's usually going to be a message of some kind to almost any story, a moral of the story, something that has to be learned. But it's okay to write fiction that is escapist. At the same time, guys, it's okay to escape. As I was saying in the chat before the live stream started, if you're getting highly distressed about election stuff, or you can't seem to, say, close Twitter and do something else, then you just walk away from the internet, turn off the news for a little bit, and go play some Morrowind or something. Go play a game. Go play Oblivion. Go replay, I don't know, whatever your favorite RPG is. Go do something else that's not accepting all of these inputs. Go do something that's an escape, because you worrying about it is not going to do anything. Sorry, but that's the case. Feeling anxious or upset about it, that's not going to change anything. When Christ told us not to worry, this is one of the things he's talking about. Not to worry about the things we can't change. If you're worrying about the things you can change, then you should go change those things, and then you'll cease worrying. But you know what I'm talking about there. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, we are commanded not to let our hearts be troubled.
Yeah.
And anything that is actively attempting to do that is not of God. Yeah.
So if you're troubled, it's okay. Turn it off. Go find something else to do. Personally, I'm not going to say I'm immune to this. Like, this stuff affects me, but when I feel it affecting me, I just go back to the knowledge that I am not the one that's in charge, and I can do things that are within my sphere of influence, that are within my power to change, if I think that they are according to God's will, and I feel that conviction. But if it's beyond that, there's really no reason that I should let that trouble me. I shouldn't let it affect me, because I'm not in charge, and whatever outcome happens, it's meant to be that way, and my worrying wouldn't have altered that. And I'm going to be okay either way.
Exactly. Like, fretting over, again, we're not talking about taking a civic interest in, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about fretting over and poring over reams of data and becoming an amateur armchair legal scholar, and letting these processes take over your life when you are not an elected official yourself. You're not a lawyer. You're not a huge media personality with a major nationwide following. Then your impact on the proceedings is less than that of a single oxygen molecule on an inbound crashing asteroid impact. Okay.
Yeah.
And attempting to bend your life around that, let that become the axis around which your life revolves, is really a form of superstition. Okay. It's a modern form of, like, divination or cleromancy or something. And because both arise from the same disordered desire, both are sinful for the same reason, which is an attempt to exert control in an arena that is reserved to God.
Yes.
Jesus Christ is the Lord of history.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I couldn't put it a better way. And people are talking about this in the chat. Put not your trust in princes.
Amen.
And it's also said, I mean, like, the world belongs to the devil. So being overly concerned with what the world thinks about this or that, that's not, that's giving in to the desires of the devil, which is for you to be distressed. And if you're distressed, then you're going to do things which are not optimal for you. So, do what you need to do. Go out, run, go lift some weights. You can pay attention to the election if you want, if that's interesting to you, or you can not pay attention. But if it's distressing you, you got to go do something else. Do something that you think is good for you. I think, relaxing, reading Brian's book, reading one of my books, reading an old book that's your favorite. That's all good stuff. Going and exercising, it's going to be good for you. And this is something that I kind of adopted, I guess, a while back, as anytime I felt like, distressed about something, it's like, well, you can sit there and stew in anxiousness or grief, or you can spend that time doing something that is good for you and is going to make you feel better. So if you're really stressed out and you're like, man, I'm too stressed to go to the gym. If you go to the gym and exercise, you'll probably feel better. Like, you'll feel less stressed, because that's a place where you are doing something that improves you. It stresses your body, but it improves your body. And you'll feel better for making that meaningful, even if it's just one step. If you sit down and do like, man, I can't turn off the TV. Turn off the TV and go do the dishes, mow the lawn. So those are things that I think can help anybody to just regulate themselves a little bit with this sort of thing.
Exactly. And always remember, God is found in peace.
Yes.
Right. That's why Jesus' number one greeting is peace be with you. Right. And the Aramaic word that is translated as peace is way more all-encompassing than we have in English. It's a way more robust word. Like, it speaks to internal dispositions being ordered, right, to kind of resting in the situation, being centered. I don't want to get all new agey, but it has a broad range of meaning that Anglo-Saxon, even Latin, don't really fully get across.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. If you're troubled, if you're worried, one, that's exactly what the enemy wants. So don't give into it, if only not to give him the satisfaction.
Yeah. Worst case, we just need to pray for Biden to have a full, healthy, and harmless term. I have my own thoughts about that. But I do, before we transition to talking about election stuff, because Brian did really accurately predict this, and it was pretty much what I expected and had talked about too. But Gene learns English. I know I'll learn this from your books, but until then, how do you make realistic mecha feel less like Gundam?
Look, are you cutting out there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope.
I know I'll learn this from your books, but until then, how do you make realistic mecha feel less like Gundam?
I'm not necessarily trying to make it feel less like Gundam.
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to make it feel like Gundam.
I think Gundam's good. And it's like, how do you make your books less like Lord of the Rings? I'm like, I'm not trying to. I like Lord of the Rings, so if they're like Lord of the Rings, it's because I think Lord of the Rings is good.
Yeah, what I am doing is I'm trying to break through the dead end that Mecha, both East and West, in the two broad categories, kind of painted themselves into, because in the West, with the Stompy Mechs, it's really descended into this semi-woke kind of gray goo Space Marine meat grinder. And in the East, with the spiky mecha, what's interesting there is there was recently an article in, I think it was Business Insider, but they point out how mecha as an anime genre is exploding, right? And like for example, Gundam is a bigger IP than Batman.
Yeah. And you know what shocked me? And I had a friend do this. He's like, the most valuable intellectual property in the world is actually like Pokemon.
Yeah, and
money. It's like, it's Pokemon. It's not Star Wars. It's not, it's
yeah,
Pokemon.
like the top 5 are like Pokemon, Hello Kitty, Winnie the Pooh, stuff like that. So yeah, but Mecha is huge. It's having this huge explosion in anime and manga, but the problem there isn't so much financial stagnation as creative, because basically Gundam happened 40 years ago and Eva happened 25 years ago, and we can only have variations of those two things ever since. I kind of think of Evangelion as the Watchmen of mecha anime. It was this deconstruction that wasn't really intended to be as much of a landmark as it was, but Japan, at least in terms of anime and manga, they tend to be very risk averse, and when they find something that works, just tend to go into what you call the milking phase, and just stay there. They just nest in the milking phase.
Yeah, you just keep doing the same things that people like, that you think people will buy. It's not even that people like, it's that people will continue to buy in. And you get kind of stagnant. People over time, they start to lose interest. And that's when a franchise eventually enters a phase that I call death, or like hibernation, where it's not really profitable to keep making shows or movies in that intellectual property space, or in that franchise, until a couple of years go by, and then you can reboot it and people have missed it and they're interested in seeing more of it. And then if that's successful, then you try to go back to the milking phase. This is the way corporations really treat intellectual property as a kind of asset. It's something that it's kind of like a machine at a factory. It's something you use to try to produce profit. You're trying to make things that are going to give you a return on your ownership of that. Rather than what I think you and I view these things as, which is like, it's an art, it's something that we care about, we want it to be good,
Yeah, and so what my project was with Combat Frame Exceed was to take the best parts of like BattleTech and Macross and Gundam and combine them in a way that creates something new by the synthesis. And to check out myself in my reviews, I succeeded. Like, I just keep hearing from readers over and over again, man, this is fresh while still pressing all the right buttons for my mecha weebdom here. Or, man, I've only really ever played like, Mech Assault or 40K, but I'm still digging this. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just find out, like, go into the DNA of these genres, find out what's the most fun, and put them together.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the things that you do is you have the build your own mech thing, but you have mech specs on stuff. This was something that I loved about BattleTech. Looking at this super chat, thoughts on favorite genres, BattleTech. I loved all the different mechs and their names and the histories that came up with them, and the different sort of technical specs that played into how you're going to use it in the game, but also how they might be used in a book or something like that. So that was something that I thought was a really cool thing for you to do as part of your franchise. And I think a lot of people liked that as well. I think people like the idea of the mech as like a sci-fi technical thing that's fun to think about from that angle. What do you think?
Totally. And if your game, I just put the link to the page on my blog, which has links to all the mech stats. Because me and my awesome concept artists, Todd of Art and especially Ardenon, have been going down almost the entire list of all the mecha in the now 2 Exceed series to date. And I've got like, if anyone knows what Jane's Defense magazine is, it lists all the specs of like military aircraft that come out. I did it in that format, so you can get all the granular nuts and bolts details on the combat frames and support vehicles from Combat Frame Exceed right there. And a reminder, Indiegogo backers know this. One of our stretch goals was an illustrated Combat Frame technical guide. And I am busily I'm busily putting that together. That's almost done. and I think it's come along really great. It's going to be going out to backers soon.
Yeah, what a good idea that was. Now I want to elaborate a little bit more on BattleTech. So I'm a big fan of BattleTech. I grew up playing BattleTech. BattleTech was probably, actually, I'd say the first mecha thing I ever saw was actually Voltron, which is a synthesis of several Japanese shows. A lot of people don't know about that, but Voltron was on in the 80s, and that was something that I used to watch all the time, and I had the toys. But once I got older, the thing that I really got into was BattleTech. And BattleTech was so cool back in like the 80s and 90s because they had all these tie-in books and there was all this lore, and those were always these really fun things to explore. BattleTech went into kind of a weird period, I guess, at the end of the 90s. The control over the IP kind of fluctuated between some different parties, and it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of stuff coming out. But now it's under license to, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I think they're doing a really good job with the board game side of it. I reviewed it on the channel. They included in the box basically everything that I think would be great for a game. Like, so if, if I were to ever make a game like this, a tabletop game, or if Brian were to come out with a similar game specifically for Combat Frame Exceed, it had some of the minis in it. It had, it had the technical sheets for the mechs. It had a bunch of art, and it had a free story. So it was in a little booklet, basically a fold over staple booklet, but it got you into all the things that you could do that are BattleTech products. So the miniatures, which they have premium metal miniatures for people who are really into minis. You can get the metal minis, and they're really good quality minis. And paint them and do whatever you want to with them. Of course, the plastic ones you could paint as well. They're very paintable. They're just not, the metal's a little bit different quality. And then it had the fiction side of it too. So you could do all the gameplay modes. I think you'd probably have to get more mechs. Actually, I think there might have been enough mechs to do the war game mode. There's a different version of the game that's more like a traditional wargaming setup, like a tactical wargaming setup, rather than 1 versus 1 or, smaller scale thing. So you could do all that stuff, and you could get into the fiction, which if you liked the lore, you could go explore that. So anybody who got that beginner box could really just go in a bunch of different directions when they were doing it. Of course, I still have my original 2nd edition box here somewhere. I don't know where it is. But back then, instead of minis, it was just little cardboard stand-up guys. It wasn't nearly as cool as the stuff today. So it's good to see them come back with that and put out some products that people might enjoy. I don't know if you have the same affection for BattleTech that I do, Brian, but I assume you have some.
I'm gonna be honest, I've only played like 1 or 2 pickup games, like local cons and stuff. I'm mainly a pen and paper RPG guy, not so much a
there's
game, but I respect it.
Yeah, there is a pen and paper RPG for it too, but I haven't played it, so I don't know if it's good or not. Yeah, I actually so this is a thing. I actually like to play BattleTech with my son, who's 5. And I play a little bit of a rules light version. You just take out some of the steps required to do the modifiers, and it gets him to do a bunch of math.
Cool.
Add this, subtract this, think about this. And even if you're playing rules light, I think a lot of these games are good steps for kids, because a lot of games that are marketed to kids are not strategic. They are random outcome games like Candyland. Candyland is not a strategic game. It's a game that is just pulling cards. There's nothing to it. It's random outcome. Well, BattleTech has the random element to it because you're rolling dice to see if you hit and where you hit for how, that kind of stuff. But it has more strategic elements, which is going to be, you have to think ahead, like where do I want to put my mech? Those sorts of things. Kids need to start thinking a little bit more strategically once they get into elementary school. So it's a way that I can teach math to my son without him realizing it as part of his schooling curriculum.
That's beautiful. There's your teaching background shining through again.
Yeah. This is just an aside. So if anybody's considering homeschooling and they're like, I can't do this, I would say that I'm actually really bad at it. In the sense that I have an 18-month-old and I have a 5-year-old. And so it makes it really hard for me to be attentive to the learning needs of a 5-year-old who needs a lot of interaction when I have an 18-month-old. So, a lot of times you do some self-talk where you're like, man, I'm really bad at this. And then I stop and I take stock of where my son is at. And my son is way ahead of what a normal kindergartner would ever be at. Like way ahead. In fact, right away, as soon as we were like 1 or 2 weeks into, I'm going to really school you, I'm having to print off like second grade math worksheets because he's just naturally that far ahead just from playing from age 1 to 4 with me. So even as bad as I am at trying to homeschool my kid, the outcomes are way better than what you get at a public school. So if anybody is sitting there thinking, okay, my kids have to go to school and be in a little bubble, it's like plexiglass and wear a mask and all this kind of stuff. But I can't homeschool because I'm not a teacher. I'm not an expert. Even if you're terrible at it, the outcomes are probably still going to be much better than what they get at a public school in terms of academics.
Yeah. So, remember back in the day when we tried to sell our folks on those games, I say, well, Mom, role-playing games teach math, right? And I have to calculate how many potions I can afford to buy. And
yeah, I remember that kind of stuff. I didn't really think about it until I saw some content from Varg a couple of years ago. Varg Vikernes. We don't need to get into who he is. He got banned off YouTube, so you can't find the content on YouTube anymore. You have to maybe try to find it on BitChute. But he's like, I bring my RPG around and my kids play this RPG and we play it rules light, and it teaches them English and it teaches them math because they're French. So they speak French at home. So it teaches them how to read English and it teaches them how to do math. And it's like, yeah, I didn't really think about that you learn a lot by doing. And when you are engaging in a more kind of free homeschool environment, there's a lot more doing and a lot less like sit at this desk and do this repetitive task. And that's learning, Yeah. So I did learn a lot through other stuff.
I know that's super creative. And yeah, I mean, I'll second what you said. Really, if you're not homeschooling at this point, I don't know what to say. Maybe you haven't been paying attention, but I mean, I don't want to dox anybody here, but I've known people who've taken the plunge who thought that, well, I can't do it. I'm not well versed in all of these different subjects. Well, I'm sure, as you can testify to, neither are your average grade school teachers, guys.
Yeah, and I had an economics teacher in high school who said that competition raised prices. And being raised by an economist, that was like, all right, I just need to read the book and answer the questions. This guy actually has no idea what he's doing, And he had taught it every year for like, who knows how many years he taught economics and didn't understand like the most basic concepts of it. So I remember I have had many moments in my life where wool was kind of pulled over my eyes. You kind of lose the disillusionment where it's like, these people, it's the blind leading the blind. They don't know what they're doing,
Absolutely.
But the main thing I want to get across, even if you feel like you're really bad at it, the efficiency, kids, we don't put kids 30 to 1, like 30 kids to 1 teacher because it's the best way for them to learn. We do it because it's very efficient from multiple standpoints, right? You pay 1 person to deal with 30 kids. That frees up 30 parents to enter the workforce, right? It's really about maximizing economic efficiency at a higher level, not because it's what's best. If you're teaching your kids one-on-one, or, let's say you're very productive and you have 6 kids, 6v1, you're going to definitely make up for any kind of loss of expertise with just the sheer fact that you can pay attention to the kids and actually guide them through the lessons. And the reality is that once you start doing this, you realize most of a school day is simply empty space. Most of the school day is lost in transitions and in basically having to gear most of your content towards the lower quartile of the students. And that's not to say anything that there's wrong with those lower quartile students, meaning they're on the lower end as far as their skills, functioning, whatever, intelligence. All those things are not really separable from each other, but the lower quartile of students, the lowest 25%, are the ones that take up about 90% of the time and also determine the pacing of what you do as an instructor. You'll, if you're an instructor in public school, you will catch things from the administration if you are letting any large percentage of your children fail. You're leaving them behind. So if your kid is at all higher than that, which almost every kid is, there's going to be just a ton of downtime where they are sitting there bored, not paying attention, talking to their friends, drawing on the paper, just refusing to do the work because it's so mind numbing. Most of the day is lost in empty space. And you can do 7 hours worth of schoolwork in a lot of cases, like 45 minutes if the kid is actually on top of it, or you can do it spread out throughout the day, which is what I try to do. It's like, okay, we're going to do reading now, and then we're going to do handwriting, and we're going to do some math stuff. And, oh, you want to play BattleTech now that sister's asleep? Let's play some BattleTech. You know, let's go outside and look at this praying mantis with the magnifying glass and talk about all those different parts. You know, like, how often do kids get to do that for science? They open up a science book and see a picture of a praying mantis, and then you've never seen one out in the yard. Try to keep the chickens away from it, you know? So just living, you end up having a better education for your kids. So that's my spiel.
Wholesome text. Yeah.
All right, let me get this super chat here. 10 euros. I really appreciate the 10 euros. I'm sorry if it takes a while to get to the super chats. Sometimes I get on a roll here and just start talking. Want to thank you for your work, David. I appreciate you watching. I used your lesson to write a chapter for my story during vacation. Congrats. That may not sound like much to you, but for a slow writer like me, that's a huge victory. Listen, it sounds like a lot to me. You know, you can celebrate. There's no victory too small to celebrate if you have improved yourself, or you've worked meaningfully towards one of your goals, or you've made a meaningful change that improves yourself. You know, if you, the hardest time at the gym is the first time you go there. And it's probably because you have to overcome a bunch of mental blocks to just try to go there and lift some weights, or like get on a treadmill if you're out of shape. You know, that's the hardest hurdle to overcome. It's the same thing with trying to step into a creative endeavor when you're not experienced, is that you have to just try. And so just trying is worthy. And then from that success, you can build on that. So yeah, you may be a slow writer now. You may get a lot faster later as you practice and just get some experience. You know, I didn't start being able to write quickly at all. took me years of practice. I still don't really write quickly if I think about it. I take my time. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, speed is really something that comes with mastery. When you're able to do something well, it's easier to do it quickly. Because one thing is, you're not constantly second guessing yourself, and there's less editing to be done afterward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's why I also say I'm a fan of planning a story, doing at least some planning for the story before you just begin. You know, what we call like pants writing versus planning, or what did George R.R. Martin call it? Gardening versus architect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason I like to plan things in advance is so that I don't have to do a ridiculous amount of editing afterwards, because something that popped into my head on the fly didn't really work out. You know what I mean? So I'm a fan of planning at least a little bit ahead of time. It means there's less editing to do in the after cycle, you know?
Yeah, I've tried both, and I'm definitely an outliner.
Mm-hmm. Dreadnought, $5. Brian, love your tech readouts. Mad Cat Timberwolf is still the most beautiful mech ever. It's very recognizable. I will tell you that the Timberwolf probably got me into BattleTech in a way, because it was, I think it was on the cover of the Mech Warrior games. At least MechWarrior 2. It was on the cover of MechWarrior 2. And it was just such a like, I don't know, it just stood out on the shelf. It made me want to play this game and like figure out what the heck was going on. Then eventually I bought the BattleTech game, and that one had I think it had the Warhammer on the cover. This is what was on the cover of the second edition BattleTech, the main BattleTech game. If you have the first edition BattleTech game, I think it came with, I'm trying to remember what it was. There was an issue where like they packaged in like some Macross minis or something. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was something like that. So the second edition is it's like the main real version of the game that you end up getting.
Yeah, that's iconic. And thank you, Dreadnought.
Yeah, there's something about it, like the ears, the missile launcher ears and the, the chicken walking legs. Yeah, it's very iconic.
And like I said, it moved copies.
Gene Learns English says there's a reason, but I appreciate the super chat too. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Gene says there's a reason there's no new Game of Thrones book. Yeah, and I mean, does George R.R. Martin even really need to write it? I mean, like, just let's think about this from like a game theory perspective. What's the optionality of actually writing the book? Okay, if you write the book, you can sell the book, which means you'll make more money, right? Does George R.R. Martin need more money? Probably not. He's probably already making plenty of bank off of that show and just back sales of the catalog as more and more people watch Game of Thrones and then go and read the books or whatever it is.
Yeah, he has more Doritos and Captain hats than his grandchildren could ever exhaust.
Yeah. So, then if you write the book and it is as poorly received as the final season of Game of Thrones was, then people are really upset with you. And then maybe you don't sell as much of the back catalog because people are like, it has a really bad ending. So if you're looking at George R.R. Martin, it's like, do I risk everybody's anger by writing a book they don't like? Or do I just like sit on this for a while? I could totally see him just not finishing it. We're also waiting on what's that other one? The Name of the Wind series. What's that one? The King Killer Chronicles?
Yes.
I think we're still waiting on book 3. Personally, I thought book 1 was borderline unreadable.
Yeah.
But it's one of the, I don't know why people liked that one. I thought it was just, it read like fantasy, like it read like a writer's first book, not in a good way. I don't know how to, you're an editor, so maybe you probably just get that on an instinctive level, but
yeah.
Like there's, it was like 300,000 words to tell a story that probably only needed 100 pages. You know what I mean? Things just took forever to say. And he would wax poetic about things he didn't understand, like putting his lute in the sun or something like that to like let the strings relax. It's like, did you bother to like talk to anybody that ever had a lute or a guitar?
Oh no, you got to watch out for the lute people. Got to get your lute details right, folks.
Yeah,
they'll come for you, like David. But no, Name of the Wind. When I read it, yeah, it was talked up by everybody. Oh, this is a masterpiece. He's the new Tolkien. That's the only benchmark old Pub has. And then I read him like 50 pages in. I know what this is. This is shaded self-insert revenge fiction by like that dweeby kid who got picked on by a Chad in gym class and is now getting his revenge, right? It's like the drama club member who ends up losing out on the role of Romeo to some guy from the basketball team who just auditioned on a lark, and now he's going to get even.
Yeah, it's been like 14 years. George isn't finishing it. Why read Martin when Tarzan has 25 novels? Guaranteed to be much more fun. That's the other thing, too, is there's 100 years worth of pulp that we can read. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
Oh,
hey guys, I mean, come on. As if it needs saying, don't give money to people who hate you. And these people hate you.
yeah.
I'm not even kidding about that.
They say so. They've spent years telling you what they think of you. Believe
Yeah,
them.
I've compiled page upon page of them saying, no, we hate you. We want you to die. We think you're pigs who don't deserve to share a planet with us. They're like, but the new one's out. Well, I'll show another $40 and pre-order it. That's just pathetic. I have to laugh.
Yeah, I think so too. So yeah, Patrick Rothfuss has TDS. It says he has trouble riding with Trump as president. I mean, this is more of what we're talking about, which is like, if you're letting all this stuff affect you to the point where you can't do anything, then that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just projection, like with the people on the left, trying to cast like Trump and the GOP yeomanry's reaction to the election being stolen, to like that effeminate manlet in the glasses giving that scream of ultimate suffering in 2016, right? And sorry, our side doesn't do that. We have lives. We don't worship politics. We have a hope for something beyond this world. So we're not utopians trying to immanentize the eschaton here. And most of us are awake to all this is doing is waking people up to the reality that it's not the man, it's the system that's broken, right? And we just know our votes don't count anymore. So what's going to happen is fewer and fewer people are going to participate. And then our bifactional ruling class is going to have a far harder time trying to claim that their whims are the will of the people when there's only 30% election turnout nationally.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea, well, I went over this on my blog today. So, and we can kind of transition into this. So, if you're looking at the will of the people, you have a system where you can't count the votes. Like just from a practical perspective, you're not able to count the votes. And then from a more realistic perspective, if all of these votes were real, then the outcomes are also bad, because there's an uncertainty with the outcome, and then there's also just that if people are using their will to enact things which are not good, then obviously the system is not good, right?
Right.
It's kind of if we don't, on a practical side, we don't have a functioning democracy, and if we did, then its outcomes are bad, which means you need to not be overly concerned with that kind of process.
All right, and notice how the other side has been going around for 5 years saying, "Oh, we have to safeguard our democracy," when perpetrating blatantly undemocratic hijinks and disenfranchising half the country. And that's because when they say democracy, they don't mean one man, one vote, and 51% carries the day. They define democracy as their political will, because you see, only they understand the true nature of reality, and only they are moral, right? Yeah. And they can't countenance anyone who would disagree with them, because they live in this epistemic closure bubble. So they can only conclude that anyone who disagrees with them is either doing it because they're evil or insane. And evil men and insane men shouldn't have a vote. So therefore, they have no qualms about suppressing our vote, right? So basically what they mean by democracy is them running the table. And in order to do that, though, the key feature of democracy is that it's the will of the people. Well, again, if most of the people check out and we've got like far sub 50% voter participation in national elections, they'll still try to claim that. They'll still try to claim their candidates have a mandate, but it will look ridiculous. And so what they've done is all they've done with 2020 is further accelerated the downward spiral of eroding their own credibility to nothingness.
Yeah, I mean, just by the way, that I'm just responding to chat. Yeah, there's somebody who just like logged on to. They were flooding the chat with unrelated stuff, so I banned them. They logged on like 4 other accounts. I'll just keep banning them. It's not a big deal. So just don't worry about it. I don't have free speech here, and if you're going to interrupt the speech of others, then I'm going to ban you. I don't really care about that. So anyway, yeah. So I think Brian, let me transition to this. Brian basically correctly predicted exactly what was going to happen in this election, which is that, and I said this too, is that it wasn't about Trump winning. It was really about Trump had to not just win, but win by a margin that was greater than the electoral fraud. I knew that electoral fraud was going to happen. It probably happens in every election, but I knew it was going to be significant enough. So it's really not about the Trump slide. It's like the Trump slide would have to be big enough to overcome all of the fraud. Now, what Brian said on his blog, and I believe this was correct, was what they'll do is they know that all the Trump supporters will come out the day of and vote, and then that will let them know how many votes they have to throw in that are mail-in ballots, how many votes they have to discover in the back room. And we found in a couple districts, they found over 100,000. You know, oh, well, we stopped the counting and then we found 100,000 votes for Biden, 100% for Biden.
Yeah, and the way I predicted this was easy. It was one, they told us exactly what they're going to do because they always do. I mean, that's why they were going on and saying, oh, well, you can trust mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are totally safe. And that's just a reverse projection. And then also, I'm from Illinois. I know the Cook County strategy when I see it, because they did it here in 1960 to Nixon. What Cook County did, and if I mean, Illinois is a blues to blue states only because of Cook County, where Chicago is. If you look at an electoral map of Illinois, there's just this deep blue area on the shore of Lake Michigan, and then everything else is just blood red, right? So what Cook County did back in 1960 was they held off certifying their vote until the rest of downstate Illinois was in. That told them exactly how many votes Kennedy needed to win, and they manufactured them. And people went to jail for it. Like, people were convicted of voter fraud. So we know this has happened before, and they said they would do it everywhere this year.
And
so go ahead.
LBJ had dead people voting for him from the grave.
Yeah.
This stuff is all old. And so when people are like, hey, here's all these people that were registered to vote in September who are 120. Yeah, they've been dead forever. So somebody registered them and then got a ballot for them and then did something with it. There's also reports of people that they walked around and asked people, are you going to use your ballot? If not, can we have it?
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is nothing new under the sun. And the only thing that surprised me was how widespread it was. I mean, they just pulled this everywhere. But again, they told us back in 2016, James O'Keefe has Senator Pichai on tape saying, well, we're not going to let 2016 happen again. So yeah, the first time nobody took Trump seriously. He flew in under the radar. He was able to outflank and blindside the establishment. Well, immediately both factions closed ranks, because guys, I hate to break it to you, but if you think, oh, well, there's 2022 and we'll take back the House and bolster our lead in the Senate, and Biden and Harris are going to be so unpopular that there will be a red wave in 2024. No, like 2016 was the last thing that could reasonably be called a real election, guys.
Yeah. And even that, I'm sure that they thought it was, they had done enough rigging in 2016, which is why the media was already declaring it for Hillary. You know, they were publishing they were already publishing magazines about how Hillary was going to win. They just didn't see it happening. And likewise, I don't think Republicans, the Republican Party, or I don't know, the masters of the Republican Party certainly didn't see Trump stealing away the nomination and then running with it. They just didn't see that happening. So of course they haven't really supported him at all for 4 years. They haven't done anything for him. I think it was supposed to be, a setup where it's like it's Hillary and someone else, and it'll be Hillary this time, and then maybe in 8 years it'll be Jeb, or this alternation of Bushes and Clintons down through the ages. That's how it was set up, and I think Trump put a big hiccup in that. And this year they just went all out. They're like, we're not going to take any chances. We're just going to do it. The media will cover for us, and they have, which is why the media declared Biden the winner. It's like, that's not how it works, guys. And at the same time, you have people who have forgotten that the media did this in the year 2000, and they also did it in 2016. So they've done this twice before, actually more than that, because remember the media called it for Dewey back in the, what was that? When was Truman elected? 19.
Well, that he followed FDR. So would that have been 44?
After FDR died. I thought it was 40. Yeah, it might have been 44.
I don't know, maybe chat can tell us.
Yeah, I have to remember off the top of my head because I just don't remember. Maybe it was 48. Because he took over for FDR in FDR's fourth term. So I think
the internet knows
too. And then it was,
but I'm not going to bother looking it up because it's trivia because look, the Republican Party hates Trump just as much as the Democrats do. They could be stopping this. Remember, Georgia and Arizona have Republican governors. They could just stop the counts, or they could just step in and certify him. I mean, like Scott Walker did in Wisconsin with his re-election. I mean, he just stopped the counts. But yeah, they're throwing him under the bus because he came in. The Republican establishment said, "Well, here, you don't know politics. Let us show you the ropes." It was Paul Ryan who said, "Well, let's hold off on implementing your platform. Let's get these bow tie conservative tax cuts and stuff done first, and then after the midterms, we'll get around to that." Well, they knew they'd lose. They had tons of Republicans retiring from the House, so they knew Trump would essentially be a lame duck in the second half of his first term. So they got what they wanted out of him. They got the partial ACA repeal. They got the tax cuts. They got a bunch of Federalist Society folks on the federal bench, and now guys like McConnell are done with him.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing too is that like Trump should have known that this was coming. He had 4 years to deal with all these things, and he didn't really deal with them. And this is the thing that is always funny because Trump is always called a Nazi and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, he's a disappointment in that he's not far enough to the right. He's a New York Democrat from 25 or 30 years ago. And that's just not enough. That's not enough to cut it.
And look, I'm not citing his death warrant here. I knew this was going to go to the courts. That's why I think he was wise in pushing through to get another justice on the bench before the election.
I agree.
So he could still very well win this. We could have another 2000 result. But what 2016 did for us and what 2020 will do for us if he pulls it off is buy us time. Because after him, there's nobody. Nobody's coming to save you. You gotta think.
Yeah.
Gotta get prepared.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like nobody's coming to save you. So you have to kind of act. You have to act within your power. Like we didn't get a wall built. You didn't really need a wall if you could change other things, but we really didn't get what was promised, and he didn't really take a lot of action to quote drain the swamp. He didn't protect himself, and he didn't really show the kind of loyalty that would make people really have his back going into this. And I think the reason most of the GOP's just been completely silent is some of them might have been in on it too. Who's to say that there's not ballot counterfeiting going the other way, and that it's just something that's known and allowed because that's that Republican district, and you allow the opposition party to have that. Same thing with gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is controlling. It's basically a deal between the Republicans and Democrats to make sure that nothing changes. It's like, we will draw this district this way so that Republicans will win it, and we'll draw it this way so that Democrats will win it. And there's never a meaningful contest. That's what I'm sure that there's some Republicans who have benefited from the same way. They're ballot stuffed or done something else to secure their spot. And so they're, of course, going to shut up about it because then they would get caught too.
Well, that's how you get Republicans keeping the Senate and gaining 11 House seats in the midst of all this, right? I mean, that's that beggars statistical probability. But yeah, it's all an old boys club, Washington, D.C. It is a swamp. The swamp is bi-party. If you think the Republicans are going to help you after this, they're among the people who hate you. The establishment GOP, they hate you. That's why they care what the Democrats think. They want to be invited to the cocktail parties, and they want to retire to the boards of Fortune 500 companies and K Street lobbying groups when they're voted out. Okay? That's what they care about. And I mean, personally, I'll say right here, except for local level elections, maybe statewide at the most, I'm never voting for another Republican.
Yeah, I mean, I had abandoned the Republican Party a long time ago for a lot of the reasons that we're talking about. This is stuff that my father really got fed up with back in like the 1990s, is that Republicans aren't really going to do anything that actually matters. They'll talk about tax cuts, and that's about it. But they won't do the other things that actually matter for, the furtherment of the society, the furtherment of the culture, preserving American culture, preserving the political process. So this $5 chat from Dreadnought, which I do appreciate, I don't see how credibility matters when they have power. If it mattered, they wouldn't blatantly cheat. I don't think this ends short of a new Stalinism. Well, the credibility has always been a theater, and I think more people are going to wake up to that the whole voting thing, the whole media calling this or that, it's all a theater. We've known it for quite a while. So I haven't really had a lot of confidence in the electoral system really in a very long time. But there's always hope. You always hope that, maybe we'll figure it out this time, and maybe we'll have an actual honest election once again, something like that.
Now, if their credibility didn't matter, they wouldn't get their panties in a bunch over the term fake news.
Yeah.
Of course, credibility matters. It's what the entire idea of democracy rests on, because here's how the left plays, okay? Their strategy, and the one that's been winning for them for 100 years, is to falsely appropriate the moral high ground. It's to set the frame, and they do that through the media, through academia, and not through the entertainment industry. So we've all got to play on their board that they have set up. What eroding their credibility does is get people thinking, well, wait, hey, what if I just flip the table?
Yeah.
Or what if I just push back from the table? It's like when the 3-card Monty guy messes up and, the extra queen flies out from under his sleeve. That's what's happened. Right? The shell game has been revealed to be just that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think more people should wake up to that and kind of realize what that is. And as far as a personal thing, it's a good idea to do what you can to establish yourself in a way that, like, the changing fortunes of some set of political parties is not going to affect you that significantly. Some people want to go the prepper route and be like, well, we're going to live out in the woods. I don't think that that's realistic for most people, but you can homeschool your kids. You can secure multiple streams of income so that you're not overly dependent on an employer who may fire you at a whim when he finds out that you are part of a bad political class or something like that. So those are all things that people should take some time and think about. If you're so concerned about who's going to be the president or whatnot, and the president has too much power, try to empower your own life so that those things will have less of an impact over what you're doing. It's not that they're going to have no impact, but that impact will be minimized. So you're not so worried about it. I do want to read this super chat, and I do appreciate it. Trump did know about this. He talked about mail-in voting. He did. Night of election, he said 4 a.m. ballots, and that happened. So you either think he let this happen for a reason, a sting operation, or he's stupid. Well, people are talking about a sting operation. You've been talking about it in chat. I haven't seen any evidence of that. But just this is a thing about Trump is he says we like Trump because he says the truth. And he says these truths, but did he have any kind of actionable plan to prevent that from happening? I haven't really seen one, at least one that was effective. So if he knew that it was happening, he either didn't have the power to prevent it or just wasn't acting in a way that is going to actually prevent the fraud from happening. And, I still have a ton of respect for Trump. I've said before, I think the average person would have committed suicide now with the amount of scrutiny he's been under and the attacks on his person, his life, his family, his children, his wife over the past 5 years. Like, I really think, people love to armchair and think about that. But if you haven't had any public exposure to, attacks, you don't really know what it's like. Like, I think an average person probably would have committed suicide, not just become suicidal in the sense they would have killed themselves, because it's just not, and it's not what normal people can reasonably take at all.
Yeah. I have respect for Trump for throwing his head into the ring. I mean, he stuck his head, he walked in the lion's den and stuck his head in the lion's mouth.
Yeah.
And that shows great courage. Now, I think NewPub is reducing a field to a binary here, because there are far more possible explanations than either Trump's an idiot or this is some sort of QAnon sting or something. Because that's the problem with events like this, like the Kennedy assassination or like the Vegas event or something like that is, look, our official investigation apparatus is largely incompetent and indifferent. So what happens is they go out there and do their usual incompetent job. They turn in a report saying, okay, this is the explanation, and it doesn't wash. There are inconsistencies in it. And, well, human beings are pattern finders and we need closure. So we try to fill in the blanks ourselves. And then you have these ballooning theories, right? But the problem is they require as many ad hoc speculative explanations as the original faulty explanation. So again, what I see in that is this misplaced desire for control, right? I mean, you are not in the Trump administration. I'm not in the DOJ. I don't think anyone here is in Congress. We don't know what happened behind the scenes.
Yeah,
we're probably never going to know.
Yeah, but I mean, because I'll read this super chat. Prevention would not have solved this. Well, I mean, prevention would have prevented it, but I didn't see him doing anything that was like proactively preventing it. And so I guess maybe there's something else going on. I don't really know. We'll find out. And I'm not really that worried about it because it's going to be what it's going to be. I'm not going to let my heart be troubled by trying to ferret out all the details of something that's just huge and multi-layered and is going to take just a titan amount of effort to sift through over the next couple of weeks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And again, like a chatter said earlier, don't put your faith in princes, right? This may burst someone's bubble, but Trump was never going to be a savior, guys.
Yeah, that's just another bit of idolatry.
Yeah, he bought us time. And unfortunately, a lot of people squander that time with infighting or grifting. I'm not saying Trump did that, but a lot of people who, like, let's say, happened to flip a coin and got famous by calling 2016 right, okay, and then said, well, buy my course, buy my books, give me super chats. and didn't really contribute anything.
Yeah.
There were a lot of grifters.
They're like, how can I do this? And we know I don't want to name any names, but if you've been around, you have an idea of some of the people that just kind of went into cash in. And I really appreciate the super chats, guys. And I don't I'm like, these people are grifting super chats. I appreciate the super chats. I always try to offer value. Like, I'm not trying to hawk a course at you guys. I have a book on how to be creative because I want you guys to be able to do what you want to do and provide a little bit of help for that. I mean, that's something that I actually care about. I am a teacher, among other things, and that kind of stuff matters to me.
That comes through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. My point is just this, that there was this black swan event, as Taleb would say, right, with 2016, and the Trump phenomenon attracted lots of folks, mostly well-meaning folks, but you're always going to have camp followers. You're always going to have people on the make for a fast buck. And unfortunately, a lot of them amassed big followings and drowned out or co-opted some of the genuine grassroots support and kept things from being done. At the same time, Trump kind of, from my analysis at this point, it looks like he got trapped in the gilded cage, was surrounded by bad advisors and just given bad advice. And that's why.
And I see that. And I also want to add, he's a delegator. I mean, that's the way he's run his businesses. Let me find the best person to do this job. And he hopped into politics, and it turned out it's really hard to delegate those things because he was surrounded by snakes, people who didn't really care about it. And like what Christopher G says here in this super chat, I think Trump was in it for the people. Going into politics is such bad PR for a guy who was universally loved. He must have had a desire to fix things. I think so too. I don't think it was just his ego. He has plenty of things that stroke his ego. In fact, I think it was it with Oprah? He called his lifestyle cute. He said it's cute, but it's not like, there's no meaningfulness to the fact that he has like all of these, he lives in like a gold plastered room in Trump Tower. Is that he wanted to do it because he felt like it mattered.
Yeah.
Like, I think an average person would have absolutely crumbled under the amount of scrutiny and stress that he was under.
Yeah. Trump is the man from the 80s. Okay. Like Gen Y folks like me and Dave will totally get this, right? For those who remember, he's basically the second coming of Reagan. If you could like resurrect Reagan and change the law so he could legally run again, 2016 is basically what you'd get. And so, like you said, David, he ran on a lot of like classical 60s Democrat stuff, right? Like pro-working class, America first in terms of trade policy and being anti-war. I mean, the dude didn't get us into any new wars. I'll be forever thankful for that.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty. I mean, he possibly ended the Korean War.
Yeah.
It hadn't ended, guys. There was a ceasefire. The Korean War is still going.
Yeah.
Possibly laid the groundwork for ending the Korean War, which is a really big. People don't realize just how big that is. In addition to all of these other Middle East peace things, Trump as a negotiator has gotten a lot of things done, and he hasn't gotten us into any new wars. I was very critical of him early on because of the stuff with Syria. We were really hoping he wouldn't have any. He would start to remove people from foreign entanglements, and eventually he did go that way. He eventually did get that done. But
yeah,
I was advised by people who were coming from the previous I don't know what to call it, paradigm, where it's like somebody somewhere in the world did something bad, bomb them.
Yeah, and just to sum up, but then on the fiscal side, he's very much an 80s Reaganaut, and I think he came in still expecting that kind of milieu to be in place, and he didn't expect the swamp. He didn't expect the ferocity with which our ruling class hates middle America. And yeah, no one else was prepared for that, for wasn't on the inside, right? So Trump is the eternal outsider. When you're an outsider, you don't know what's happening behind the green door.
Yeah, and you're coming into a machine that's already running. And so that includes the military, right? It includes all of the other departments that report to the president, like Department of Homeland Security, the FBI. It's like FBI directors that hate him and want to weaponize something that's supposed to report to the president against him, and was weaponized against him prior to him taking office. How are you supposed to hire and delegate in a situation like that? Versus Trump's companies, which he built, constructed from zero, was able to put correct people in place in order to build those brands. And if one of the companies wasn't working out, he could fold it and redistribute the parts of that worked into his other companies. You can't do that with government. You can't be like, well, this FBI thing isn't working out. Let's fold the FBI and we'll make another company. Like it doesn't transfer over. It's really hard to fight against that amount of entrenched interest. And this is something Thomas Sowell said. This is what made him stop being a Marxist. He has a story about it where he was a Marxist even after studying with Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago, where he got his PhD in economics. He believed in Marxist principles, because I only abandoned him when I started working for the government. And I was studying the impact of minimum wage laws. And basically I came to this conclusion that it was basically what Milton said. When you raise the minimum wage, it just prices low-skilled workers out of the market and makes them unemployed. And I realized that I couldn't publish this because everybody in the department their whole point was to make people adhere to the minimum wage. The government had its own interests and its own velocities behind it that really had nothing to do with the interests of the people at all. Minimum wage had nothing to do with what was good for the people. It had more to do with how the bureaucracy was perpetuating itself. And that's when he began to abandon those principles. So, that's a good story to me. Let me read this super chat real quick. Going to wait for the Supreme Court ruling or revote. Now, I do think it's going to go to the Supreme Court. That is why I said it was strategically better for him to get a Supreme Court justice on the bench prior to the election, so that when things went down to the wire, you have at least 4 people on the court who are going to side with you. You have a solid 4.
Right. And could he still win at the Supreme Court? I think if he's going to, that's where it'll happen. And probably in Pennsylvania, because you remember the court had delayed ruling or refused to rule on an appeal from Pennsylvania, where the Pennsylvania state court had effectively legislated from the bench and changed the law about the deadline for counting mail-in ballots. And Republicans in Pennsylvania appealed it, and the Supreme Court, I believe, decided not to issue a ruling. But Alito, in writing his opinion, said, well, we can revisit this after the election. And Barrett wasn't able to take part in that, having so recently started. So that could lead to hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes being thrown out if the Supreme Court revisits it with a 5-4 majority, and that could flip it back to Trump and he wins.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll before I get to this super chat, BZ says, the Supreme Court's not supposed to work on party lines. It's not supposed to, but it does. Like, that's the reality we live in, is that there's one vision that has a different perspective on the Constitution than the other. One views the Constitution as a dead document, meaning one that means what it says it means, and the other one believes that it means whatever they feel like it means on that day, or feel like it ought to mean, or feel like how things ought to be, regardless of how the Constitution actually says. That's the division. And those happen to align with our 2 political parties. You have the originalists or textualists, whatever you want to call the camp of, quote, conservative justices, which are just the Constitution says what it says. And then you have everybody else. Let me get to this super chat. There's always hope. If things were really hopeless, the Mesopotamian civilizations would never have lost power. It's not just that. So here's my response. It's not just that. There's always hope, because even at the worst possible time, it just means Christ's return is imminent. And I can't imagine something better than, Christ's return for those of us who believe.
Yeah, and look, that's definitely true. I believe that, but I don't think it's necessary to appeal to eschatology to find a kernel of hope here, because look, we got to put this in context, okay, guys? We are coming off a decades-long period of unprecedented ahistorical prosperity and peace here, following the two great industrial world wars. Okay, the period from like 1946 until now has been a huge anomaly. Most human beings throughout history have lived, they've had it way worse. Okay, and I don't want to recycle a dead meme, but the one about hard times creating strong men, right? We're like just we're at the zenith of that cycle, and now the roller coaster's starting to head back down to the next dip, but it's going to come up again. And honestly, yeah, things could get bad, but really, things have always been bad, but people have still married and taken in marriage and made and lost fortunes and watched sunsets and prayed and worshiped their creator and gone to heaven, right? So it really is what you make of it.
Not only that, but like it's a weird, economically, when you look at economic trends, you find that the quote, the harder the economic time is, the more people do things that we would consider spiritually fulfilling and correct. The more kids they have. So prosperity creates sterility. There's been storms coming and going. So notice it just got dark in my room as I'm talking about this. As the storm comes, people do those things which are more spiritually fulfilling. They have more kids in worse economic times. This is really a weird thing where it's like, shouldn't you want to have more kids when you have lots of money? It's like, no, because that tends to not nourish the spirit. It nourishes the senses, and the senses don't care about procreation and things like that. People go to church more often in hard times, and people write and consume more books. They read more during hard times. It's really weird how these cycles work. But it totally happens. So just because something gets worse than it was yesterday, maybe it's only worse economically, or it's worse in one way, but it may be better in a multitude of other ways that aren't apparent to you until you are actually experiencing them, right? So once you start going back to mass and you realize how fulfilling it is to be back in church, now that everybody, now that there's a Democrat in office, there's no more COVID. That's what's going to happen. It's like, we're going to ignore that there was a pandemic or whatever. Once you get back into mass and that starts to fulfill you again, you will feel better about that, and you'll have a better, your life will be better in a different direction.
Knock off some more super chats.
Yeah. Media calling it before the votes come in is a form of collusion and treason. If Biden ends up not winning, SCOTUS is also majority conservative. Yeah. So it's totally collusion, and it's nothing new. Like I said, they've done it before. They did it in 2000 and they did it in 2016. What they're doing now is it's just trying to demoralize you. It's trying to distract you. It's trying to make you feel bad. This stuff is far from over. Al Gore made them do recounts for something like over a month. It's like 37 days or something. They were doing recounts to try to prolong this until finally the Supreme Court put an end to it. So it's nowhere near done. They're trying to make you feel like it's done and make you feel like you're defeated because they want you to feel bad. Remember, they don't like you. So they're not being honest. Nothing's been certified in any of the states. Nothing's actually been decided. We still haven't figured out where that truck, U-Haul's full of mail-in ballots came from. But those things will end up being decided by the SCOTUS. That's probably my prediction. At least some part of it is going to go down to the Supreme Court. And I could see Trump making it go to the Supreme Court, even if it's somehow mathematically impossible for him to win, just so that it's there, just so that it's like, hey, here's the voter fraud. Like, I could see him doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible there have been a ton of other potential outcomes suggested for this crisis, and I mean this is a constitutional crisis, which can be a gift if you know how to use it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And for those of you who are students of history, if you look at late Roman Republic stuff, we're not at Sulla or anything like that, but there's a lot of the same things happening that happened in the later periods of the Roman Republic, say 2nd century BC, which is you have an increasing division of political ideologies into camps that view themselves as incompatible. So you have like the proposed Gracchan land reforms, which actually did get enacted after the brothers Gracchi were murdered. But you had one of the Gracchi was murdered by the Senate. They killed him with clubs and threw his body into the
Tiber
River. We're not there yet, guys, but there's this increasing division between a group of elites that view controlling things in one direction and a different group that wants things to go in a different direction, where the ideologies are no longer super compatible with each other. I am at a crossroads. I can't decide between real estate and running a radio drama channel on YouTube. I highly respect your opinion. What do I do? Well, I would do real estate personally. I mean, if I was deciding, you could always do both. The problem with running a radio drama channel on YouTube is not very reliable as far as income goes. It can be good one month and terrible the next. You never know if you're up or down. You get banned unilaterally by a robot, and then you're SOL. When the robot bans you, you're kind of done. So you're working for a robot when you work for YouTube, and that kind of sucks. Same thing with Amazon. You're kind of trying to figure out that Amazon algorithm is basically working for robots. Real estate, I don't know what real estate markets are going to do. If immigration increases again here in California, Kyle, I think you live by me. I think you live kind of by Modesto, right? Anyway, or maybe Riverbank. I see the property values in California going up simply because of economics, because there'll be people trying to get in, H-1B visa, people coming to get in. And whenever things increase in the Bay Area, that spills over here into the Central Valley. So I think property values will go up, and I think a lot of people will be looking to trade what they've got. If I were going to move out of state, I could trade the house I have now without owing anything and buy a house bigger and better, or buy land in another state really easily, and not have to carry a mortgage or anything when I leave. That's how expensive things are here. People don't, the things are at least twice as expensive here in California. And I live in a cheaper part of California, and I chose to live here because when I was living in the LA area with my wife, it would have cost us $800,000 to buy an apartment, which we don't even technically own all the walls of. Think about that. Put not your faith in princes doesn't mean not to care or fight for good leaders. I agree, Hardwick. Otherwise, David's army against Saul would have been idolaters. No, it's really, your faith should be in God first. And if it's really that you shouldn't, if a leader is doing something that is against God, you can rebuke him because your faith is not in him, it's in God. But if it's a righteous leader and he's doing the right thing, then yeah, you can fight for good leaders. You can support them.
Yeah, no one's saying not to.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just faith is a different level. Faith is something I believe. I like the thing with maybe the ballot sting or something like that. I think that's kind of a cope. I don't know if that's really going on, but it feels like people having kind of a cognitive dissonance thing where they're like, he must have executed the sting because he knew that this would happen, and then it happened. So there must be something else going on there. Either that, or he knew that his best chance would be to be able to try to fight it in court. I don't know. So I don't have faith in him. I believe that he will do things that are within reason for him to do. But I don't believe he's a savior. And you're right. And Brian's right. He was never going to be a savior. He was not going to save the Republic. And buy us time to figure out what's next. Could RBG's death timing be providence? I.e., God allowing her max time to live without keeping ACB from being a justice before election. It could be. I am not in a place where I can say that for sure.
Yeah, we can't know.
We can't know, but it may be. Sometimes time can illuminate that. I think Brian and I have talked about Humanae Vitae, which was basically comes down to birth control. And it's a weird thing, but now you can see it with demographic shifts. How many years? I'm trying to remember the year of it.
I think that was 64 or 65.
So we're now
68. I was wrong.
We're over 50 years away from it. And we can see that there actually was providence to it. Now that we can look at the data, it's like, I can't say for sure there was, I believe that there was, but that was something kind of prophetic that, the consequences of that weren't going to be realized for a long time. It's very interesting for me to stop and consider it and think about it.
Yeah, Paul VI predicted that the widespread acceptance of artificial contraception would lead to the government getting involved in people's bedrooms in the most intimate aspects of their lives. And here we are. And so I would say in hindsight, it was absolutely prophetic. And I don't want to sound dismissive of the super chatter's question, but yeah, like David said, we can't know what was and was not providence. We can get illumination from history, but ultimately we won't know until we behold the beatific vision in heaven.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. Now I can say that I think it was a good decision because, presidents can come and go, but you can't easily remove a justice from the Supreme Court without them dying. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, boy, she really held on for a long time, considering how poor her health was. So you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. But that is somebody that can, at least in terms of the process or the theater of the process, resist things that are going to tread upon liberty for the next however many years that she sticks around. So I do think it was a good thing. I don't know if it was providence for it all to work out that way, but sometimes I think of there's the end of The Hobbit where Gandalf asked Bilbo, "You're not starting to disbelieve the prophecy simply because you had a hand in bringing them about, are you?"
Yeah, and that's such a great Catholic line because, okay, ultimately, if we want to get into some deep theology here, so God is all powerful. His will is non-controvertible. Okay. But at the same time, because he's all powerful, he alone can arrange matters so that the free outcomes of human free will advance his plan without doing violence to his omnipotence or omniscience or majesty. So in the end, if evil comes about, it's only allowed in service to a greater good. Now, again, we got to be careful. That's not to say that God does evil so that good might come about it. That would be evil and therefore self-contradictory because God is supreme good. If there were any evil in him, then he would not be God, which is a contradiction. But there's a difference between actively executing evil and allowing the evil effects of free human actions to then turn into greater good. The greatest example of which is the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The greatest evil that's ever occurred happened to God, and he allowed himself to suffer that to bring about the redemption of mankind. That's his MO.
And Jesus knew ahead of time what that suffering entailed, which is why he asked for the cup to be taken away from him, which is like, I don't want, this is going to suck. This is not going to be fun.
Yeah, it's such a human response.
He was fully God, fully man.
Yeah, so, Arian's BTFO. Anyway.
And of course, you know, of that,
or Dositus, I suppose.
Mysteries, the suffering was real. And the suffering was real.
Yeah, and I mean, just to speak on the subject of suffering, I mean, yeah, Republicans might be suffering right now, Christians might be suffering right now. Jesus never promised us nothing but sunshine and lollipops, folks. He said, you will be hated, you will be persecuted, fathers will turn in their sons, sons will turn in their fathers. I come not to bring peace but a sword. And he came to set the world on fire. And you can't let a bumpy patch distract you from the goal. Run the race to win. God is the ultimate true end and subject of our existence. And that's got to hold true in the political sphere as well. I mean, God establishes governments and gives them the power of the sword for his purposes. And like you said earlier, David, a government that betrays that purpose nullifies itself. I mean, they lose a mandate of heaven. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I like to think about things that way. I mean, that's a good way of thinking about it, for sure. I just want to address this from Impreb. It's like, I guess the issue I have with both you and Brian's opinions on the recount sting is Trump has to show his hand. He doesn't, and assuming he does, clouds judgment of his actions. I'm not saying that, so I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying that he didn't, you know, I didn't see any proactive things. I'm not seeing proactive things. That's all. And I don't really know how it's going to pan out, but I assume it's going to be going to the courts, which is what he anticipated. So I don't think he's stupid in that regard either. I think people assuming there's like a sting, I think are just, I don't know. I think they're coming up with a very, very clever solution that may not have been feasible or possible. And I think he's going to do whatever is possible for him to do. I don't think he's going to roll over and die. That's not Donald Trump.
No, any other Republican would have conceded by now and said, oh, well, let's wait till all the votes are in. Or, well, you know, that's the people have spoken. I guess I'll congratulate my opponent on a race well run. No, he's fine with this. I mean, just today he said this election is far from over. So he's fighting it. But again, Occam's razor, that's the sting theory fails the parsimony test. Okay, invoke no entities beyond what are strictly necessary to explain the situation.
Yeah, I think the situations he knew that that things would have to go to the court. And so he prepared for that.
Yeah.
You know, and they also think it would have required such a harsh level of secrecy to like have the Department of Homeland Security or someone running like a sting operation. It's just, I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible because there's always some black swan event that seems impossible till it happens. But it seems very, very improbable and may also just be more complicated than it needs to be, as Brian says, by a lot. I mean, it may just be you go to the courts and you prove these things in the courts and they'll settle most of it. Hopefully.
Yeah, eventually.
Now, there was somebody arrested in Texas for voter fraud.
Well, good.
This is not, the mainstream media hasn't been talking about it, but it was in local news. So she was a worker at an assisted living home and was registering dementia patients and then filling out their ballots. So that's what she was doing. So yeah, this is the other thing. People are like, well, Do you think Biden really orchestrated this massive thing? So he doesn't need to. Every little group operates like its own little cell. As long as it feels like there's something it needs to do for its side to win, they're separately empowered to do it. It's kind of like terrorists. It's why there's no massive terrorist organization where you can lop the head off and the terrorists just go away. Each of them has their own little cell that they believe in what they're doing ideologically. So I believe each of these little, Pennsylvania could have just done it on their own without any input from the Biden administration at all if they wanted to. Just it only requires a couple people to join the conspiracy. If you have a handful of people running the election, 4 or 5, it's really easy to have a conspiracy between 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, and with how ham-fistedly and brazenly they pulled this off, they attempted to. They had the water pipe and the glitch in Georgia, and then the glitch in Michigan, and dead people voting. Yeah, they clearly didn't get together and compare notes too thoroughly. It's just like we saw with the Russia hoax thing, guys. The Strachan Page emails. These people are not Sherlock Holmes, okay? They're not Einstein. Frankly, they're idiots suffering from a pretty severe case of Dunning-Kruger, but they do have all the power right now, but they're really clumsy at using it. So that's what we're saying. That's why I'm saying this is a gift, because the net effect of this, whether Trump wins or loses, is it disenchants people with the system, and to be free of an enchantment is a good thing.
Yeah. To be free of illusions is a good thing.
Yeah. So a disillusionment gets a bad rap. It's a good thing.
I can't think of the only time you don't want to be free of illusions is at a magic show, but that's the point of the magic show.
That's what politics is.
Yeah.
There's still people who think that they've got coins sitting behind their ears. I'm here to tell you, the establishment palmed it. Okay, here's the trick. I'm showing you the turn, right? I'm showing you how it's done. And I know people don't like it, but and that's fine. I mean, root for Trump. I'm rooting for him to win too, because he won the election, and if it is stolen from him, that's a grave injustice to everyone, even Biden voters. It's an injustice to Biden voters. They're cheering on a con being pulled on them too.
Yeah,
because they'll be stuck with a geriatric shuffling around in the middle of the street at noon with his underwear around his legs, like looking for his people.
What she used to. So yeah, that I don't know. I know a lot of Democrats because I have them in my family. I don't know a single one who thought Joe Biden was a good candidate or was happy with Joe Biden's nomination. Now, that could be, a little sample size. I've never met a single lefty or a Democrat online or offline who liked Joe Biden and wanted him to be the candidate. Not one.
Yeah.
So that says to me that there's something else going on there for how he was manipulated into that position. And I think we saw that with Hillary Clinton. Like the fix was in for her to get the nomination from the get-go. It's like, it'll be Hillary Clinton, and then she was out. So it's like, Joe, it's your turn. You're the next one up. And he's like, what? Poop my pants.
Yeah, people forget how the Democrats had to drag him back into the ring, because I remember back when they'd first floated him, and the news from the Biden camp was, oh, well, because remember, his son had just tragically died, and he was in his twilight years. So at first, he'd said he wouldn't seek the nomination. So yeah, this is elder abuse. He's totally being manipulated. Biden isn't the bad guy here. That's what we've got to avoid. We've got to avoid setting up these cults of personality where we just look at the chosen leader of one side or the other as the avatar and the epitome of everything they are. And that's not even necessarily true of Trump in a way, but it's definitely not true of Biden. I mean, he's Weekend at Bernie's over there, guys.
Yeah, I just like it's, and I think, I said they picked Kamala Harris because she's she's a checkbox, a woman, black. She's really, she's black, but she's half Jamaican. Didn't grow up with her Jamaican father. Didn't grow up in the United States. Grew up in Canada.
Yeah, she was the worst choice. Like
How did on the ticket and then win? Well, it had to be manipulated somehow. There had to be some kind of something going on. Because like I said, I've never met a single person who was a Democrat, and I'm friends with lots of them. Like, because I live in the real world with other human beings that they don't all think like I do. But none of them were happy with Joe Biden. So that says to me that the fix was in for him, at least within the party, for quite a while. Okay. Bets on which country Biden will be getting into a war with next, Russia or Poland. That's if he becomes president. There's nothing to say that he's going to be president. I'm not calling it for Biden.
Yeah. Well, let's do a thought experiment and assume he does. It's going to be Iran.
Okay. So yeah, I will say he will not get into any kind of war with a country that can actually offend the continental United States in any way, shape, or form. So the endless war only occurs. The endless wars only happen in countries that have no reasonable defense against us, as far as counteroffensive. I mean, not like, they obviously Afghanistan is I don't have time to get into that whole muck, but Afghanistan is like an unconquerable mountain country. The Soviets couldn't conquer it. We're still trying to fight someone in it. I'm trying to protect drug lords. It's a whole mess. You're only going to fight wars in desert countries or African countries that have no way to counterattack us. So Iran is probably, Iran, they're next on the list, maybe Syria. But Syria is kind of good with Russia, so it may not be Syria. I think Iran. Yeah, I think Brian's maybe right with that. Any others? Sudan?
I don't know. I'd lay my bet on Iran because if you look at what's going on, all the old neocon types from the George W. Bush days are sidling up to the Biden campaign and trying to get advisor positions. I saw that, I don't know if it's true, but Dick Cheney reportedly is advising Biden. And yeah, like you said, David, those are their criteria. They want a Middle Eastern war against a country that can't effectively fight back against the continental United States, and where they can just get involved in a quagmire where the military-industrial complex can just keep
manufacturing jets and tanks and designing new super stealth planes, even though the countries we're fighting against don't have any radar capabilities anyway. It's I think it's always going to be war. It's like 1984. And George Orwell talked about this in 1984. The wars were never fought in the countries. Like, it was never Eurasia and East Asia fighting in East Asia. They were always fighting in Africa and India. They were fighting in the third world because those people were of no consequence.
Yeah.
Because it was safe to do that. And the point was to have war go on, because war destroys resources and empowers government and all those sorts of things. So the war goes on forever because it must go on forever because of all the interest in that it goes on forever. And it never takes place in any way, shape, or form that could threaten any of the countries involved. It's all proxies.
Right. I would like to address one comment from the live chat that I saw, I believe, Megabuster Shepard make a while back, which is that he hoped that all these shenanigans would lead more people back to the church. I can say anecdotally, and I don't know if you have a similar report, David, but just recently, I've had multiple friends and acquaintances join the church or return to the church after falling away in high school or college. I mean, it's been incredible. And that's what has me brimming with hope right now.
Yeah. And that's, and I think we just talked about that. The harder things they cause people to go back to the church. And if you find more peace and fulfillment. And I will tell you that there's more peace and fulfillment in, in your spiritual life than you're going to get just enjoying the pleasures of life.
Right.
It's a higher level of satisfaction. You don't have to die happy, but you need to die satisfied.
Well,
That you always did the right thing.
Yeah, and that's an internal examination I would invite our listeners to make, is to ask yourself, well, why are you so worked up about this? Why are you in this? Right? What's the outcome you want? Do you want Trump to win so that you will have lower taxes, a better income, nicer neighbors, reliable roads and infrastructure? Well, those are good things, but they're material goods, and the ultimate destination of material goods is the service of the spiritual. The spiritual is the highest priority. So what the political order and really what the people's role is in a Christian society is to consecrate the temporal order to God. Okay. Now, I would say that Trump makes that easier, right? Like, he's been the most pro-life president since that became a thing. Okay. And he is fighting to roll back all these death cult initiatives that have taken root. So what my optimal outcome is a society where living the basic tenets of Christian morality doesn't require heroic virtue where you have to put your life on the line.
Sorry, say that last bit again.
Sure. Well, right now we've already got one foot in there at least. We live in a society where exercising the basic tenets, the basic requirements of Christian morality, requires heroic levels of virtue. Right? During the ages of faith, when society reinforced Christian morality and everyone was it was the water everyone swam in, right?
Yeah. But when it's all against you, it requires more, and it cultivates more virtue. So this is now that you won't know the virtue that you have until you have a struggle. And I've had struggles in my life before. They have made me more virtuous.
Right.
So you won't know the virtue and there's no virtue to just doing what everybody else is doing. Like, if everybody else is going down to the altar to pray, it's really easy to do that because you're just doing what the group does. It's much harder to go down to the altar and pray if you're the only one. It's much harder to pray at the altar if not only you're not the only one, but there's a mob of people outside who want to throw stones at you for doing so. Then the simple act of prayer, it becomes something much more than that. And I know that may seem like an extreme thing, but there have been situations where that's been the case. And even this year, basically they were able to ban church. So It requires a lot of effort to think about just attending mass, for instance.
Yeah. And now, in an age when we didn't have all of the media and government and institutions against us, Christian leaders would rightly recognize, well, that's no law at all. That's a tyranny, and just ignore it.
Yeah.
Because a law which contradicts the natural law negates itself. It does not bind in conscience. Now, that's not to encourage anyone to go out there and flagrantly violate the laws. And Christian freedom is no excuse for bad behavior, for doing intrinsic evil. But at the same time, we will likely, whether Trump wins or loses within the next decade, get to a point that we might have to show some passive resistance and might just have to tell the state no.
Yeah. Yeah, they banned mosques as well. They banned all gatherings, and that includes religious gatherings. And I was like, this is the base. This should be a basic freedom, is that you're able to worship. Nope. Turns out, it's one of those things. Constitution means whatever they say it means. And we should not be illusioned to the contrary. People on the right love to do this. They love to invoke the Constitution. Constitution's a man-made piece of paper. It only has as much power as the people who are existing want to give it power, right? It's not a divine creation. Otherwise, you're just not idolizing anything that's worth idolizing. It's a piece of paper designed to create a government that will hopefully be a good government for people to have. It's not like a divinely created thing that we should always evoke. Same thing with like evoking concepts of democracy, like I wrote about on the blog the other day. That makes an idol out of democracy.
Yeah, exactly. The original Constitution was based on compromise, not objective truth, right? It's a product of the Enlightenment. So when people, even on the right, appeal to the Constitution, I ask, okay, well, which Constitution? The one that gave women the right to vote, or the one that enshrined men in dresses as a protected class? Which Constitution you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I look at the Democrat Party now, and I'm kind of like, it's kind of baffling to look at it now, because it's so different from how it was 20 years ago, when I was really, I don't know. It's just so different from how it was under Clinton and Gore, and even the 2000s with Bush. It used to be this party of American protectionism and like workers' rights and stuff, and now it's like the party of penectomies for little boys and kicking people off of Twitter. I don't know.
Yeah, we remember the Clinton years. Clinton was the most conservative governing president of my lifetime. Like, you take 1996 Bill Clinton, looks like Eisenhower compared to Trump.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Trump is a Democrat from like 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah. Or basically, I mean, Trump is basically governing like Clinton did. Because, I mean, Clinton didn't advance the same-sex marriage agenda, right? He stopped Hillary from trying to implement universal health care because he didn't think it was time. He basically balanced the budget. And I'm not trying to sing Bill Clinton's praises here. I mean, dude is a scumbag. He was the one who invented the swamp. Everyone forgets, because there's always been graft in Washington. Bill Clinton was one who brought Southern-style, big man, organized crime to DC. And that's what the swamp is. Okay, so he doesn't get off scot-free. Yeah. But in terms of how he actually governed, he didn't really do much. And that's fine by me.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to address this super chat, and I'm sure you can weigh in. To wear the mask or not from a Christian perspective. I'll just tell you what I did, which is I wore a mask and gloves all the time when I went out. And this was before there was any kind of mandate or something, because I have my in-laws are not in the best health, especially my father-in-law has basically a compromised immune system, and my mother-in-law has lung problems because of radiation treatments like 30 years ago for lymphoma. So those two people are very vulnerable to a virus which causes significant respiratory distress. I know it causes significant respiratory distress because I got it, and it caused basically it gave me SARS, which put me out of commission for a couple of days. It could have killed my in-laws. So I was very, very protective of them. I didn't get it despite having my mask and gloves, because I didn't get it from the grocery store. I got it from my son, and my son got it from his cousins or some other kids. I don't make my son wear a mask when he's playing in someone's backyard. So he got sick, and then a little bit later, we all got sick from it. So he was definitely the first one. Why did I wear it? I wore it and I wore with gloves because I didn't want to transmit this infectious virus to my vulnerable in-laws. Now, if you're talking about it from a social pressure perspective, that's a totally different thing. which is like if the business, and actually, I think, there's a bodybuilder on YouTube. He used to do, I think he still does it. His name's Mark Lobliner. He's like, if a business asks me to put on a mask, I will do it. But otherwise, I won't put it on, because he's like, I'm against it. Well, that's basically evoking somebody's right to request that you adhere to some kind of norm when you enter their property, right? That's like a pretty normal thing to think about. And I think he's actually Jewish, so he's not Christian. But you have to think about, what are other people asking of you? If a business wants you to wear a mask, you wear a mask to go to the business. And if you don't want to wear a mask, you can, I guess, try to not go to that business. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything biblical or Christian or not Christian about wearing or not wearing a mask. And in fact, the earliest proponents of wearing it were guys like Nassim Taleb, he is himself a very devout Orthodox Christian. So it's really, the government mandates it. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree necessarily with mandates, because there may be a situation where you need that mandate. But as far as putting it on or not putting it on, you need to adhere to the normal way of what people expect from it. If you want to do business with them, if you have some sort of desire to defy norms or defy like social pressure or something, that's on you. That's not really like a Christian or not Christian thing. But to me, I view it as a normal thing. It's the same thing as like wearing a shirt, right? Like I wear a shirt. I'm on stream wearing a shirt. I go into a business wearing a shirt. The business wants me to wear a shirt. Is a face covering significantly different from that? It's different, but it's just something that's kind of expected of you. Some people are saying it's like face coverings in the Muslim world. Well, if I were going into a Muslim country, I'm not a woman, so I don't have to deal with this, but let's say it's standard to wear some kind of head covering if I'm in a Muslim country or any country. Well, I want to respect the traditions and the social attitudes of the people that are there, and I want them to feel like I respect them, so I would wear the head covering.
It's not American tradition, though.
Yeah, there's nothing that specifically forbids me from wearing a head covering in the Bible. If they declared that I must bow down before Satan before I entered the country, then I'm not going to that country. It's simple as that. Right.
Well, because that's what they're doing. I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
And I'll preface it by saying that I'm on record. You can look at my blog and my Twitter feed as supporting the initial lockdowns when we didn't know as much as we do now about the virus. And when they said this is going to be for 2 to 3 weeks to flatten the curve and keep ICUs from being overrun and keep people from dying. That was, in my informed opinion, reasonable, not excessively burdensome, and practical. Because from a Christian morality standpoint, okay, no one is or can be under any moral obligation to do anything which is either evil, harmful, or futile. Okay. So one example that actually has direct bearing on this, there was a case of an Italian monk from, I believe, the 1400s who had severe asthma. Okay. And he lived in South Italy, which was more humid, had more pollinating flowering plants because it had like a more year-round growing season. So it's really bad for his allergies, and he was suffering under this asthma. His physician told him, well, look, you need to move up north into the Alps where the air is colder and clearer, or you'll die because we can't treat this. And the monk said, well, no, I grew up here. I live here. This is my home. I don't want to move. I would rather stay here and die. And so the matter went up before the church because he was in religious orders. And the church ruled that, yes, you have the right to stay, even if it means your death, because the process of picking yourself up and moving would be unduly burdensome. Okay. So he stayed and probably died of an asthma attack. Now, how does that apply to the current situation with the masks? Okay. So to be morally binding, a mandate like the mask mandate must meet a number of criteria. The ones I mentioned, which is it's actually got to provably do something. It can't be futile. It can't be excessively burdensome. And one of those stipulations is it can't fly in the face of local custom. So I'm actually going to argue from the reverse side of the argument that you made about custom, David. Thomas Aquinas teaches that in some instances, custom can have the force of law. Now, in East Asian countries like Japan and China, wearing surgical masks like during flu season is the norm, but it's not the norm here. It's not the norm in America. And the attempt to make it a norm has been a top-down coercive effort contrary to custom. So I would say the mask mandate is invalidated on those grounds, but then also more egregiously, it's got to be universal. Okay, like bills of attainder, laws passed against a certain person or group of people in America are unconstitutional. And the CDC has even said, well, like BLM for protesters don't have to wear the masks. They're exempt. That invalidates the law. That is not a law. That is a tyranny. You are not, from a Christian perspective, morally obligated to follow it, period.
I was never arguing that you're morally obligated. It's your option.
It is.
It's your option whether you want to try to defy that socially or not. If a business wanted me to wear a mask and I wanted to do business with them, out of respect to them, I'd probably wear a mask. I could tell you, I also live in a community that just doesn't really respect that. Like, we're supposed to wear masks at the park. I'm not making my kids wear masks while they play at the park. That's dumb, right?
And I hear that. Here's one thing just to conclude really quick. So in regard to the first point of the course of top-down nature of it, so initially, yeah, I agree. These measures were reasonable, practical, not excessively burdensome, and temporary. But what I also called and what I warned about on my blog and Twitter was that, well, the left never lets an opportunity, they never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
And when I saw all this infighting about, oh, was the virus deadly? Is it racist? Is it a hoax? Is it real? Like, people are missing the forest for the trees. Okay, it is what it is. But both sides are going to try to use it as a political football. And Trump initially grabbed it and started running with it, like when he issued his China travel ban. But the left has now taken it from him, and they're using it to punish us, because the point is his mandates are coming from people who hate us.
Yeah.
So now it's a humiliation ritual now.
It's been transformed into like a humiliation ritual. And I could definitely see that as part of it. It's like, well, you're going to wear the mask because we want you to. It's like, well, what about all these people protesting over here? It doesn't count for them because the protest is more important than the masks, you see. Or they're, the Antifa are wearing masks while they protest. Right. But for a different reason. And yeah, I can definitely see that. Now, I'm one of those people that, like, before the pandemic hit, I was the guy wearing the mask and the gloves in Costco, getting all the stuff, and people are like, what's with these crazy people? It's like, you guys, I've already warned everybody online, get your toilet paper now because you're not going to get any next week. And no one believed me. Some people believe me. But the benefit is, I thought about also with this election, I'm like, if something bad happens, I have lots of rice and toilet paper in the garage still. Not a bad optionality. Rice and toilet paper were not expensive to stock up on.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've followed your advice, and I've got provisions laid up. So thank you. So yeah,
rice. It's good.
It is. I was for taking reasonable measures when it was temporary. We didn't have the scope creep, but yeah, now it's out of hand, and I don't think the people in charge know how to stop.
Yeah, and if you look across the ocean, you can look at Japan. So Japan did all the same stuff. They did it. It was because they have a much more socially unified culture than us. It was pretty universal. And then they went back mostly to normal. So they did it, and then it was over. Now we kind of half did it, and then it's never over. It's never really going to be over until there's something else that you can replace that with, as like some kind of cornerstone of fear or attention or whatever you want to look at there. you know.
Yeah. And I don't mean to downplay, because I know that you've got Corona Chan, other people I know have. And yeah, so I'm not on the it's just the flu side, because no, I mean it's pandemic. It's killed over 1 million people. But again, at the same time, you've got to weigh the measures we're taking to try to mitigate this disaster more burdensome. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So we came out with this right when this was hitting. I asked all of my Pulp Rev friends, I'm like, let's put out a free book. And everybody threw in a story or a novella into this thing, which you can get the paperback still like really cheap. It's like $7 and something cents. It's a royalty free paperback, which basically means we're not making money on it. So you can buy this huge book for like $7, or you can get the ebook for free. Brian's got a book in this, Anacyclosis, which you can read for free, and that's a tie-in, right? To what is that a tie-in to?
Combat for MXC, and in fact, the mech that is my avatar, the MCF 121 Defender, features prominently in that story.
Yeah. So yeah, you can Anacyclosis, it's right there. And there's also Crown of Sight. The entire text of Crown of Sight is in here. I wrote and I'm trying to finish it up, but a sequel to this in the same series. This is like a little side series to my main fantasy series. I'm not going to release it right now because I don't feel like now is a good time to release something that is specifically a tragedy. Just doesn't feel like a great time for tragedy right now. So I'll probably line up the sequel to this with the Eternal Dream Book 3, which will come maybe next year, depending on when I can get everything done. So you can get this for free, guys, and just search Corona Chan Spreading the Love. And there's a bunch of other authors in here. Who else? I got John Delarose is in here. Raul Neonzi's in here. John Mollison's in here. John Mollison just came out with a book. Alexander Helene, he just came out with a book on Rush, but he's got a story in here. But a bunch of people. Jakob Merkin, who just finished his space opera book or space opera series. So lots of good stuff in there. Please do check it out. It's got both me and Brian in it. But this was so that, hey, you're going to get locked down. Got some free entertainment, some free reading material.
Yep, great author.
You know, there's other blessings to the approach to Corona as well that I can definitely interject. Is that I think it's made a lot of people realize how little value they were actually getting out of public school. To kind of circle back around to that idea again. And that to me is kind of a good thing. Once people have their kids home and they realize just how little they're doing and how little school is doing for them, I think a lot of people are rethinking this whole compulsory public schooling thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a silver lining. So is a number of people who are looking around their cube farms and thinking, wow, we don't need nearly as many make work jobs or personnel as we thought. We can telecommute just fine. Mm-hmm. So I've friends who are enjoying their lives with their families, working from home.
Mm-hmm. You spend time with your family, and at your home, you look like them. Well, you know, maybe I could grow some crops here on my little house. I could raise some chickens. We have some chickens now at my house. So lots of other little benefits that are there. So even if something seems really like grotesque and oppressive, which like infinite lockdowns, if the lockdowns are infinite, then we have to completely rethink our way of life. So no, all right. But the benefit is that you get people who rethink about little things in their life. A bunch of little things can add up. I think telecommuting is going to take off, Bradford.
Yeah, agreed.
I think a lot of people are going to rethink exactly what it means to be in the workplace. Now, I said this, and I have to word it a certain way for like my normie friends because I don't want to sound like too crazy, but I think a lot of the practices that are enforced in a workplace, like get up, come to work at 7, you have to be at work at this time. At this time, you are released from work, which are ingrained in us through public school. So it's two sides of the same coin here. A lot of people are going to realize that this is more about like controlling the employee and turning him into a somewhat of a slave-like being rather than getting work out of him. And I think as more people telecommute and they realize that they have a defined number of tasks that they need to do, and they can do them in whatever ways they need to do, depending on where they're at, take time here or lose time here in order to get, as long as their work's getting done, it's fine. And I think you can have people getting released from this idea of like, I have to wake up, I have to be there at 8, I have to leave at 5. I can't take the, all the stuff that is really about controlling the employee and exerting a lot of control over him and his personal life. Again, to reference Nassim Taleb, he talks about this I think it's in Skin in the Game. It might be in another book, but he calls employees slaves. Because people prefer employees because employees, you can make them do whatever you want them to do. And he gives an example of a contractor in the book that's a pilot. And he goes, let's say you have a pilot and you like hiring him, and you hire him for each flight that you want him to fly your plane. And one day you book a flight and the pilot doesn't show up, and he says, well, I got offered twice as much money to fly these Saudi princes around. So I just did that. I'm doing that job instead. Well, now as a flight company, as a airline company, you're in a big bunch of trouble, because how are you going to get the plane? It's not just how are these people going to get on the plane and get where they need to go? You're expecting the plane to be at a certain place later today. How are you going to fix all this? It becomes a big problem. So what you do instead is you convert people from contractors, from freemen, into employees that act like slaves, that people are willing to accept lower pay and a real loss of personal freedom in exchange for security of income. You can basically order them around and tell them what to do, because you need that employee to always be there on time for the plane. So even if he's not as efficient, he's not as good as the private contractor, he doesn't do his job as well, he maybe costs you extra money, you do it because there's a security of making sure that he's always at the same job. He's dependent upon the job on a certain level, and he won't break from the norms of that job. So anyway, that's kind of down the rabbit hole. I think more people are going to reject this idea of like, work has to be done between this time and this time, and I must show up there. And like, I had a job, just to ramble a bit, I had a job where if you didn't have anything else to do, you were expected to do something. It's like, why aren't you sweeping the floors? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you're always having to do something because you're at work for that amount of time, rather than doing the work that's actually there. You have to make work for the person to exist and live there.
Indeed.
Anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but it just strikes me that a lot of our work, I'm sorry, I'm eating a cough drop because my mouth's getting dry, but a lot of our work arrangements are based around, controlling somebody's schedule in life, not having them do work for you.
Yeah, I think it covered the bases. Much like in education, a lot of the way that the workday is structured is still based on like 19th century manufacturing models of productivity.
Yeah.
And it's no accident that the schools are structured like that, because one purpose of Prussian style education, with its like bells and regimentation, was to prepare kids to work in factories.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, so if you look at factories, for instance, it's not about getting the most work out of the worker. It's about getting the most productive time out of the machines that the worker is using. It's about keeping the capital equipment running at optimum efficiency. So when I worked at basically a chicken slaughterhouse, we had 3 shifts. We had a day shift, a night shift, and a graveyard shift. Why did you have 3 shifts? Well, because if there's not a worker there, that machine is not running. That machine is not doing its work. The value is in the capital equipment. You're trying to get as much value as out of the capital equipment as possible. And that's straight out of the 19th century. So yeah, the schools are there to turn kids into good factory workers that show up on time and leave at a certain time, so that the machines always are being used. So you get the most money, most return out of the investment of the capital equipment, the machine. The employee is just there to run the machine. He's replaceable. He's really inconsequential. When you run a factory, it's about machines making things and people are managing the machines. It's not really about people at all.
Yeah. I mean, one of the 2 most expensive times to run a machine. It's when you turn it on or shut it down. That's when it uses the most energy.
Yeah.
So you want to keep it running.
Yep. Anyway, I think we've gone on for about 2 hours here. Probably need to wrap it up. So Brian is the author of Combat Frame Exceed, an entire series of Mecha books that you can get into. Now, I'm going to go ahead and link it again, but I want to make the point that, and I think you and I have talked about this, this is not a series, this is not Wheel of Time, but Mecha. This is not a series that just goes on and on with no sense of resolution in each book. Right?
Absolutely. Each book tells a complete story with a definite beginning, middle, and end. And in fact, I've already finished the first Combat Frame Exceed series. So Combat Frame Exceed, Coalition Year 40, and Combat Frame Exceed, Coalition Year 40 Second Coming form a complete series. They're the CY arc. Okay. Combat Frame Exceed S is the first book in a new series, which is going to run for 3 books. So I've already delivered on doing a mech series to completion, and now I'm rubbing up for a second one.
So yeah, these are complete stories. This is the same thing with my fantasy series. Each book that you read is a complete book. Even my more, I guess, seriesy series, which is the Moonsong series, each book gets you to a definite conclusion of a story. But with the Eternal Dream books, even more so, it's an end to the book. I really don't like trying to string readers along, and I like when I read a book for it to be a complete story. So that's really what I go for as a writer, and that's what Brian does as well. So you can hop in on this and know that if you read the book, you're going to get a beginning, middle, and an end. And when you close the book, you're going to feel like that was a good book. I read a story. This is something I think that's been lost with series is over time, where you get to the end of the book and you're like, when's the next one coming out? That's what they want you to think. But just as often now, because I've kind of have the veil pulled over my eyes, I'm like, well, that didn't end. Makes me not want to buy the next one.
But yeah, thanks for bringing me on and for helping me show my books.
All right,
last for the rousing conversation.
Last question before we go. I'm not sure if to go with mechas or cyborgs that fight like mechas in space but are as big as humans. You can always do both.
Yeah, let's have no false binaries. But see, there's I kind of see the Eva influence there. I don't know if that's what he's going for, but you can't escape it.
All right, there was one more chat I wanted to answer before we go, which is, let me find it. Homeschooling your kids is almost essential at this point, but what's the best way to combat the lack of social interaction with other kids? Play dates. Well, let's first be realistic about how much social interaction they get at a public school. Because when they go to a public school, they're sitting usually in rows nowadays at the elementary level in little groups. And while they're at those little groups, they are not usually allowed to engage in normal social interaction. Rather, they're required to be quiet and do their work, or they're required to work together on a project, which is not exactly the same as unstructured social play. They get their social interaction during recess. So they'll usually have 15 minutes of recess in the morning and maybe 30 for lunch, maybe 10 or 15 in the afternoon. So less than an hour of unstructured, real social time a day. So is that hard to replace with kids? And the answer is no. How do I replace it with my kids? Well, we have a park in the neighborhood where there's lots of kids. We just go to the park every afternoon. My son plays with his friends, which are the neighborhood kids. Lately, they haven't really been in school either because they've been having to do remote learning or whatever. So take them to the park. You can do play dates. You can interact with other parents and find other people that are on the same wavelength as you and set that up. But really, it's good to just go to the park where they can talk to other kids, learn how to make friends with them, learn how to play with them, make up games with them, that kind of stuff. Because you're at school and they're just there, it's easy for kids to go out on the playground and be like, I guess we're doing stuff together now. But in reality, most of the day is not social interaction at all.
Yeah, especially not now with the virus mandates. I mean, the kids are get kept separate in school. So really that whole canard goes out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're not even allowed to play during recess. All the kids have to come to the park after school to play with each other, which means, and let's make a point there. Like, okay, we're going to make them be completely socially distanced during school and create this dystopian nightmare for our children. And then they leave school and walk home together and go to the park together after they leave your special sterile separation of each other. That makes the measures pointless. Right?
Yeah.
It just makes them pointless. They're walking to school together. They're walking home. You're gonna be like, you guys can't talk to each other on the way home. They're just going to wait till they're out of earshot of you, and then they're going to hang out together. So what's the point of trying to enforce like bubble mode at schools? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean the what about socialization objection to homeschooling has always been kind of a zombie meme. You know, not to cast aspersions on the super chatter because he's asking in good faith, but I mean, just think about it. Where did we get the idea that being arbitrarily grouped with kids based on just age for 7 hours a day is normal socialization?
Yeah.
Throughout most of human history, that's not how it happened. I mean,
I say this like, let's go back in time and ask a Roman. It's like, so we had this idea that we're going to take 30, 13-year-olds, boys and girls, and stick them in the same room with one adult. They'd be like, are you insane? 13-year-olds need to be out in the field learning to do things and out with their dads learning to hunt. You know, it would make no sense to our ancestors what we do.
Yeah, and Brad in the chat there, it's like there was never any lack of social interaction and testifying on his own testimony. Amen, brother. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and like I said, you know, the real social interaction, the kids aren't able to do it. They're just doing it at the playground. My son really gets basically the same amount of play as other kids. That's how it is. And that unstructured playtime where kids can just make up games together, negotiate the rules, play together. That's really where the social interaction stuff comes. And also when you press hard, you'll figure out that when teachers say socialization, they mean adhering to industry or adhering to institutional standards, which means they learn to walk in a line up, sit in their seat, speak when spoken to, turn in their homework. That's what they mean by socialization. When you dig deep down, it's acting a certain way. It's adhering to the to the institutional norms. And that's what they're graded on. I went over this on the homework video. Like homework, for the most part, is just grading kids on their adherence to one of the institutional norms. And the kids are graded on it all the time. It's like, this kid got an A in English and he could barely read. Well, he always participated in the classroom discussions. He was never tardy, and he always did his homework. It didn't matter if he had mastery over the subject at all. And we have a big problem actually now. We're grade inflation. Kids go off to a decent school. They go off to college with a 3.8 GPA and flunk out because that 3.8 GPA was not indicative of their actual mastery over anything. They were just well-behaved kids.
Yeah, I think while browsing earlier, I chanced upon a news report where there's been this like actual conspiracy within the education system, and I think Georgia, to artificially inflate failing kids' grades and make it look like they're doing better on standardized tests than they really are. Look at some kind of hijinks with that.
Yeah.
Don't quote me though.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what it all goes there, but you can look at this. If there's a discrepancy between the grades and the tests, you know something's wrong. And so, you know, I've worked at schools, and this was a problem at various schools where the testing was low, but the kids were, quote, doing well in class. And so then their conclusion was, well, the test must not be accurate. It's like, well, I think the test is probably accurate, but we're just not putting the demands to get a grade are not the same as the test. So the test is really just revealing the discrepancy between the level of instruction and what's being assessed in the class and what is actually the actual standard, you know. Anyway, so we probably need to wrap it up. I really do appreciate all the chats and the super chats. I appreciate Brian for coming on and talking election with me. Like I said, if it's stressing you out, if it's too much, turn this off, turn off the internet, go do something else. You don't need to be troubled with this, and you don't need to let it just control your thoughts or your life, or especially bring you distress. And I'm not immune to this. I'm a normal person like you. I'm not going to say I've had zero distress over election uncertainty or something like that. But when I feel that, I just go back to the knowledge that I'm not empowered to change what's going on. And the people who are empowered to change it, if they're going to be able to change it, they are going to be in the place where they can change it. And otherwise, it's not, and it's going to be what it's going to be. So I don't need to trouble myself with it. And if you find yourself troubling yourself with it, it's okay to take a step back and do something else. Someone asked, will there be more game streams? I will try to make more game streams happen. So yes, because I think that's fun stuff.
I will co-sign everything David said, including the game streams. And point out that, if you do find yourself feeling anxious or worried about what's going on in the political sphere, just offer it up. Offer it up as a little personal mortification, a little sacrifice, a little oblation to God for the sake of your growth and holiness. Because at the end of the day, that's why you're here. That's what matters. And gold is tested in fire.
Yeah. And iron sharpens iron.
Oh, absolutely. Good point.
So
be not afraid. It's one thing we are commanded more to not be afraid than anything else in Scripture.
Be not afraid. That's what's the first thing an angel says to you?
Yeah.
Be not afraid. I think that is two things, which is that the holiness can be terrible to behold, but also angels were probably really scary, very impressive beings. So yeah, be not afraid. So God bless you all. Thank you for the super chat, Lawrence. I appreciate it. I'm sorry you missed the stream. I'm trying to do it every Saturday at 1. I'm not doing the Wednesday one anymore because it's just not working out for my family's schedule. And I'd rather spend the time with my wife and my kids. It's a little too much stress to make that happen in the middle of the week with all our other stuff that's going on. But I do appreciate everybody stopping by when we were doing the Wednesday show. Now it's the Saturday show. And that's great because that means I can get a lot of great authors on. I don't think I can get Yakov on, though, because it's the Sabbath. But anyway, maybe we'll have him on a Sunday stream or something. But I appreciate you guys. God bless you all. And if you're struggling, I'd say go to prayer. And it's okay to turn off the news. It's there to capture your attention. And remember, what is true today, once new things are discovered, will be untrue. So you're not doing yourself any favors by gobbling up as much information as you can right now, because the information you have will become outdated later. We don't know how Trump's legal team is going to deal with this. We don't know what the outcome of the election is actually going to be, guys. Not yet, anyway.
Yep. So show your support how you can. The best thing you can do, other than praying, is just pointing out to fence-sitting or disappointed friends and neighbors just how corrupt the system is, just how clownishly they tried to steal this. This is a great opportunity for dissenters to wake people up and bring people across to our side. So use it. Use the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, guys. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Brian, for joining me. Be sure to grab Brian's book. He also has another book called Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You, which I do recommend. So we didn't plug that one, but you can look that one up. Just Google it. It'll probably be the first result. And we'll see you guys next time. Okay. God bless you.